one of my favorite essays for years now, probably for 5 or 6 years now, is called Defuturing the Image of the Future. It's written by Andrew Blauvelt. It was published in the Walker Center Art, like their magazine. The first line of that essay is, every act of design is in itself a small act of future making. And the reason that I love that essay is because one of the things he talks about is that in enabling certain futures, you also have to imagine and envision what futures you start to close off to. And so to me, I think that becomes really, really important in things like this. When we imagine a future, for example, where cars are taking over every city, right? And roads are being designed in that manner, and perhaps pedestrians and cyclists are in a second and third tier kind of circulation function across the city. What other future are you shutting yourself down to?
Radha, welcome to Think Forward.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Very much looking forward to this. This goes to show you, audience, that if you just reach it, you don't ever know. They might say yes. You just reach out to people.
That's right.
But we know a lot of the same people. But it's just really nice to fellow designers. Radha has just an amazing. Just your journey is amazing. Like how you have gone through from architecture and narrative writing, storytelling, finding foresight, right? So I think before we get started, one of the things I found really cool, because I knew your name and I knew from Julian, it's like, Jimmy Mystery, which I know you're not related to. You might be, but
I don't know.
It means craftsman, which I think is cool, which basically craftswoman, craftsperson. I mean, you are a person that is about craft. I mean, that is the essence I think of you when I think of you. Like you are a true person who pursues craft.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely the desire to like make or find meaning through making, I think is just inherent to who I am. And I think it's in my DNA. I think it's in my blood. I don't think I had a choice.
Any designer anybody creative listening to this can be like, shakes their head, listen, they're driving in the car going,
Yeah, but it's also in my last name. My dad was an architect. He's retired now, but he was a licensed architect. He did urban transportation planning. My grandfather before him was an architect. My great grandfather, as far as I understand, was a builder, like a carpenter. And so I just grew up around, even my aunt, like I grew up around building things, around wanting to do that, and I think early on for, one of my earliest memories of having access to design as an intentional thing was like seeing my dad in his workshop in the garage in our house in the suburbs of LA County, in the 90s, like, and basically like taking scraps from whatever he was making at the time, which was also a hobby of his, to do carpentry on the weekends.
I'm trying to imagine you as a little kid picking up wood pieces. It was
my favorite thing. The smell of wood that had just been cut on like a table saw was like my favorite smell. It was my favorite smell. And it was such a, and it was such a, but imagine being like 10 years old saying that to somebody and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, especially in like the suburbs of Los Angeles. What do you mean? Like, you're sitting in a workshop all day, like your dad is, and so, but I loved like taking those scraps and just finding things around the house and like just building things with it and creating my own dream worlds and creating my own kind of like exploring my own imaginaries. And it's not something that we got to do in school all the time because it was very academically kind of oriented, of course. And, back in that day, like we didn't have as much of this, this like question-led learning that I think my children are experiencing, which is beautiful, or play-based learning. It was very memorize the thing, get it back out on a test, do really good on that. And that will lead you to college.
Yes. That reminds me of my sister and I growing up, because my sister, outstanding at memorizing and regurgitating. She would have been an excellent actor.
I was horrible.
Memorizing script, or she would probably have been in theater. Me? No. But I remember, but I learned. There's a difference, like I retained. I didn't get the A, but now, I love you, Laurie. You're probably listening. But she didn't, she fully admits she doesn't really remember anything from school. It's just kind of in the brain, and just dump it out, right?
Yeah.
I think what's everyone fears the technology issues that could be with addiction to tech or blue screens. I get all of that, but there's an aspect to how much do you have to learn? Like, my degree's in accounting. I don't use abacuses anymore, right? It's like we use calculators, we use computers. So it's like, what is the layer in which you train? My son is using VR. He's 9.
Amazing.
And yes, before I get comments that he shouldn't be that young, yes, I know he's quite mature, but he plays this thing called Gorilla Tag where they all run around. It's like I'm listening to them. It's like they're on the playground. There's other kids and they're all like gorillas running around trying to tag each other.
No way.
After an hour, the kid is like, he ran like, I don't know, a 10K. He's like exhausted, but he also is he's a goalie. He's doing goalie training. He's a snowboard. There's a snowboarding game. Like he's doing things to practice and interface with it. And I keep thinking about, how you interface, you trained as an architect, how you interface as a designer, and, you've evolved the lineage. So when did you realize that like you're still part of the family tradition? Like when did that evolve? Like when did you just realize it's kind of
in what sense? And like when did I realize I wanted to be an
architect? You have a different I mean, I'm sure you'll have your woodworking hut at some point if you don't already.
It's my dream.
I know. I'm sure it's in LA. It's space is limited in LA, but
that's right.
Build that little.
Our garage has my husband's gym set up right now, so I lost that battle.
Right. Well, there's the backyard, the Radha shed. You can call it the Radha shed, and the Radha shed will be a woodworking space, right? Art space. There you go. But then you have but you've continued that as a builder, right?
Yeah.
When did you see you've just kind of evolved? Like you've just kind of evolved the tradition.
Here's the thing is like, I have always felt, because people ask me like, if you knew everything you knew about your career today, would you have done architecture school to start that off? And I say without a doubt, yes, because what that afforded me was that architectural education. And I did it twice. Like I did my B-Arch and I did my M-Arch because kind of knowing halfway through that I didn't want to be an architect, but I just really loved that architectural education. And I came away from that understanding how to kind of wrap my head around systems thinking, understanding stakeholder engagement, understanding how to put myself in somebody else's shoes and think from a place of empathy. Like all of these tools, I think, are really necessary when you're doing futures work, right? How can I envision how this might affect somebody in any given future? And one of the kind of key points of framing for myself, and I don't think this happened exactly, I hadn't articulated it. I could feel it as a thing. I could feel it as an emotion in architecture school. And it wasn't until I got out that I could articulate like, wait a minute, buildings are future artifacts. We are signaling something to people, right? About values that we have placed in this kind of machine in the ground, about behaviors and norms that we anticipate will continue to be behaviors and norms, about the ways in which we believe the city will evolve around this thing, about attitudes towards things like climate change and the impacts of sustainable design. Like all of those things are embedded in these layers within this artifact that you are designing, right? And you can look at the landscape of any city and go back and say, okay, that house has been there for 100 years. There was no built-in HVAC system. That means that either the world was not that hot and you could use passive cooling mechanisms like opening doors and having fans and opening windows and things like that. And maybe maybe architects never anticipated that the world would get that hot 100 years ago, right?
Right.
And so it's things like that made me realize like I am still using architecture as my primary mechanism to understand how the world is going to evolve. Now, does it include the research around emerging technologies? Does it include research around that's more from a sociological perspective, maybe a little bit of kind of like armchair anthropology here and there? Yes. But I am still thinking about what the world looks like 20, 30, 50 years out. And sitting in a company like Arup, the really cool thing is I can then build those linkages back. And we have tools like backcasting that I'm sure you're familiar with in our Foresight work that allows us to say, if this is the vision of what we would love to happen, if we want to see cities being more connected to natural landscapes, if we want to see children growing up in urban environments that allow their brains to actually be functioning in a healthy way, what does the built environment have to do now to respond to those future desires?
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're a podcast host or someone wanting to be interviewed on podcasts as a guest, visit podmatch.com. Podmatch automatically connects ideal podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. We always say it works just like a dating app, but instead of connecting you for dates, it connects you for podcast interviews. Podmatch has connected over 85,000 guests and hosts together for interviews that listeners love, all while saving you countless hours of administrative work through built-in automations. If you're ready to level up your podcast interviews on either side of the mic, start today by visiting podmatch.com.
Right.
Makes a couple things come off of that. One is, as futurists, I think the best futurists are also historians. They look at macro, I mean, history in general, but macro history especially, to larger changes in cycles in pattern. But as somebody who didn't go as far as you, but studied architecture and has a passion for it, I'm also I don't know if I'm an architecture historian, but I definitely studied the different architects, and you can look at buildings and go, that's a Bauhaus, or Frank Lloyd Wright's Prairie Style, or you can look at Pei. Like, you can look at these, or the brutalist of the 70s. Growing up in Baltimore, there's a library that's like a Guggenheim, but it's brutalist architecture, cold and stark. And I always joke, you can tell like science fiction when it was made when you look at the woman's hairstyles, because they never seem to get there right. They're always the victim of their decade.
That's
and it's the same thing with, like, when you look at buildings, like, you look back and those styles obviously influence, and it just, for example, like the Gaudi's Sagrada Familia finally finished after 126 years. But it's like, you look back and it's like, what the styles were that created that artifact of the future. It took 125 years to make that artifact.
Yeah. And he was in his 30s when he started that. Isn't that wild?
He knew it would outlive him. Right. It's like, but
that's a futurist.
That's a futurist. Right.
Yeah.
And when you look at his, cantilever, his design, I was looking, I don't know if you've been there. I went there and they showed like how the weights and balances, like, the thing should not be standing. Like, you wouldn't think it should work, but it does. And that's someone who invented a building style on top of like the structure. And to your point, like, you think about sustainability, like, what would it, and that's exactly when I think about like Paris. You talked about, like, are they going to have heat? Like, when they built like those walk-up apartments in Paris, they didn't have elevators. They kind of stuck them in the middle as like an afterthought, like after the fact, right? Mini splits were created in Europe because they couldn't get central air conditioner into old buildings. They just had to put a pipe in and, hang a heat pump off the side of or the top of the roof. And you're right. It's like, how do you create structures and how do you evolve when you design futures, right? I think that applies to everybody's type of work, because it's like, when you have to be thinking, what is the impact of your work, not just tomorrow, but like long term, right?
Yeah, and how will the impact of your work change, the perceived impact of your work change over time, right? Because what might seem like a great idea, I mean, we talk about this when we talk about, like, so one of my favorite essays for years now, probably for 5 or 6 years now, is called Defuturing the Image of the Future. It's written by Andrew Blauvelt. It was published in the Walker Center Art, like their magazine. And he talks, the first line of that essay is, every act of design is in itself a small act of future making. And the reason that I love that essay is because one of the things he talks about is that in enabling certain futures, you also have to imagine and envision what futures you start to close off to. And so to me, I think that becomes really, really important in things like this. When we imagine a future, for example, where cars are taking over every city, right? And roads are being designed in that manner, and perhaps pedestrians and cyclists are in a second and third tier kind of circulation function across the city. What other future are you shutting yourself down to? What other futures weren't allowed to kind of come into the mix in that way? And I think what I have found in my work is it's not necessarily a complete like shutting down of those futures. It's saying, is there another path through that, right? So we're now seeing cities where like the car is not the primary mode of transportation, and folks have really intentionally kind of gone through and said, okay, let's retrofit our roads and reimagine how people and things move through the city so that cars are not at the focus of this thing. But it takes some unlearning to be able to do that. Amsterdam, famously.
Yeah, Amsterdam's a good example. Amsterdam's a good example because they have pathways dedicated on roads for bikes. Now you'll get scooters on there that act like jerks and drive like bad men and bad women next to bikes, but they keep them visibly, physically separate from car lanes, not just a white line, but it allows for massive amounts of bike traffic, which keep the car traffic. I mean, you live in Los Angeles. I mean, that as someone who's worked on a lot of mobility projects and, you know, worked in the air taxi business and looked at, especially the new eVTOLs, people have to think about, you know, LA, like Dallas, this metroplex, people might move across from parts of town with an air taxi because I've heard people don't date each other if they live in other parts of LA.
It's a long distance relationship.
Because it's too far away.
It's true.
I was like,
it's like if you're, it's like, I guess the analog would be like if you were in like Manhattan versus Brooklyn, right? You're not dating over the bridge. You're just not.
Even on the island, there, my wife's uncle lives. Sorry guys listening. It's like my wife's uncle lives in the Village.
Yeah.
He would never dating like Upper East, Upper West Side. It's like Mars.
Yeah.
Like it's not even like Brooklyn. It's just,
and we don't measure by miles. You measure by minutes because miles is not an accurate indicator of how long it's going to take you to get from one part of town to another. So like we have friends in the Valley and I have friends. We live in the middle, like in mid city in Los Angeles. And I love it because I am equidistant from downtown and the West Side, Santa Monica. But if anybody is like up in Sherman Oaks or over to the Valley, I'm probably
Silver
not
Lake.
See them for a year. Yeah, no, I haven't been to Silver Lake in years, in probably years.
There you go. Yeah, because my wife's uncle, a different uncle, they work at Disney. They live in Burbank, right? And it's like we went to go see friends over in Santa Monica. It was like we were trying to like, you know,
cross country trip. You're road tripping. Yeah. Might as well pack a bag. Yeah.
Well, and it's like when I think about, you talked about buildings of future artifacts, it's also the cities themselves. Like this, it's like, what does the layout of the city, when you put a building in the ground and when you think about the future, like, how do you, the work today you do, like, how do you carry that sensibility in the work and when you're doing futures work? Like, how does that translate for you?
I mean, I think it starts with this idea that there is no blank slate future, right? So we do have to, you said some of the best futurists are historians, and I take that to heart deeply. So we have to kind of recognize and meet people where they are. What is the landscape of the city? What are their tensions? What are their fears? What are their hopes? And then, you know, what is it that we are trying to bring people towards? Like, what is the vision of a preferable future that folks can kind of galvanize around and want to mobilize around, right? And I think like that work is really hard because it's so hard. One of my old colleagues at Autodesk used to say, you know, if you want to make soup for the world, you're going to end up with water. And so what ends up happening
I love that.
And so what ends up happening in that work is there are two questions that I think have really kind of formed the basis of my practice. And one is, what do I hope to leave behind and for whom? And then the other one is, who is this preferable for? And in both of those things, you are having to consider the notion that like you're not going to please everybody, right? That is an impossible task. And as I think in the work that we do, that is something that we have to kind of reckon with on a pretty regular basis, is that somebody's version of an ideal future is going to be somebody else's version of something that's maybe problematic or maybe hurtful or you know, something that they have to grieve. In a lot of the work that I'm doing, so much of that is to come in as a mediator. You know, I don't ever come in with this notion of like, this is what I think needs to happen. I'm coming in with a designerly mind and perspective, of course, but I think what that allows is the ability to tap into people's needs and expectations, even the implicit ones that aren't always clearly articulated.
When you came to Autodesk, correct? Before the futures practice, and talk about this kind of transition.
Oh yeah.
Did you get the job at Autodesk for a specific
a story.
How that because
I got the job and then I lost the job. Okay.
Okay. Because a lot of people wonder, like, you created and have built not only just work there, but you built like some of the best foresight practices in the world.
Thank
and it's
you.
like, you're welcome. And that's truly sincere. I mean, it's to see
I can't
that
take
kind
sole
of work.
credit for that, but I do appreciate you.
No, it's two things. It's a standing on shoulders of giants where we take all the techniques and the things that help us. And at the same time, it is a team effort. And that's where the culture and really creating, solid organizational foresight capability. But, it has to start somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the futures team of one. We didn't exist. Like, share that story, because a lot of people wonder. People know it exists now, but it's like it's like they think it's like, oh, it's been around. No, not really.
No,
no.
It's now it's led by this phenomenal woman named Dr. Erin Bradner, and she is doing a really great job. I just saw her back in San Francisco a couple weeks ago, and it was
I want to get her on
up.
the show.
She's amazing. She is absolutely amazing. So brilliant. The funny story is, I was first hired to be the senior evangelist for AR and VR. I was poached from Steelcase. I was doing work with Steelcase, looking at the future of work back when.
I was going to say, did you work with the futures group?
Adjacently, so we were
I would call them the human, the intelligence. Yeah, they were like the research group. I don't think they were traditionally futures, but you were doing some serious futures work there, though. That group
very serious futures work. I was in the consulting side of it, so we took the research and we applied it out in market, basically.
Got it.
And so they were my close collaborators, but I was not nested squarely in the workspace futures group. But this was when the future of work was a very sexy topic to be, focused on.
Yes.
And then Autodesk came calling, and they said, we really need somebody who is a strong storyteller, who can evangelize this technology that we are kind of investing in. And I basically said, like, I don't know anything about AR and VR except for some of the very baseline research that we had been doing about the implications for work, right? For the workplace.
Yep.
And they said, cool, we don't need you to know about AR and VR. You can research that. We need somebody who understands how to tell stories to various audiences, right? And so I joined, and about 30 days after I joined, the new CEO, who had just come into his role, Andrew, the organization went through a massive reorg. They divested from AR and VR as part of that. So my team got dissolved within a month of my hiring date.
Man.
But in that time, I think I had made like enough friends just going around the organization that one of the guys there, he was a fellow. His name was Mickey McManus. He literally one day like took me and he pushed me into the office of the VP of corporate strategy. And he said, hey, John, I think you need to meet this woman. and we just started talking. And next thing I knew, he like had created a role for me, basically. And I came on as a creative lead and a storyteller. And what that meant at the time was doing a lot of kind of executive presentations and talks. But what that allowed me to do was to meet with all of these executive leaders across the organization and to understand what their individual points of view were on
you had audience. You
what
had
Autodesk was doing.
Audience.
I had right, exactly.
Did you know the term foresight? Did he know it when he was?
So,
did you kind of like?
No.
No. Okay.
So here's what happened. So I had been on Arup's Foresight team in London and then San Francisco. I moved to Steelcase for a couple of years. I was doing future of work stuff, but I was kind of finding myself moving further away from Foresight, but still had a really deep passion for it. And I believed in the value that Foresight could bring to an organization. And so what had happened in this kind of new role where I found myself in corporate strategy, because I had this audience with all these executive leaders, I started to realize that we didn't have one cohesive point of view on what long-term future was. Now, these people were super brilliant when it came to their industry strategies. They knew what the market looked like. They really had insight into how the market was shifting in a kind of near term. But there wasn't any one mechanism kind of coalescing all of their various points of view into like, here is our 10-year vision on where we think the world is going and how we fit into that, right? And I think each leader like had a implicit kind of assumption about what was going to happen, but it hadn't been explicitly stated anywhere. So I asked my VP at the time, and I was like, hey, can I do this thing that I'm making up? It's called a Foresight audit. I don't really know what we're going to learn from this, but I want to go and I want to interview like 100 people across the organization. And I want to understand what are they doing to think about futures? Like, they might not know specific foresight methodology or have the kind of lexicon at hand, but maybe I can do some kind of mapping to start to get a sense of like, are these behaviors already taking place in the organization, right? And if they are, then why not create some formalized infrastructure to help really propel that work forward in a more valuable way? So we have a mutual, Jeremy Carter, who was my thought partner in that work.
Shout out Jeremy.
And shout out Jeremy. A wonderful soul. So he kind of like went on this ride with me without really knowing what was happening. And I really, really appreciate him for that. Because I was just like the weirdo who talked about foresight all the time and nobody knew what it was. And to the point
you would
where,
ask Phil, you could ask Phil Balaktis when I came to McKinsey, he's like, I was the only one talking about it. It's like, like, no, you're not alone anymore. Like, no, sorry.
No, and to the point where like it became so associated with like me as a person that we had a bell on our team, and every time I said foresight, somebody would ring the bell because it was just
I got called Future Boy. I got called Future Boy at McKinsey. I don't know if that's a really good
like
name or reputation to have.
I know, probably not.
Right.
But anyway, so we put this, this audit together, and what we found was like, we're doing all these things and we're doing them pretty well. We're just not doing them together, and we don't use the same language to talk about it. And so, we presented those findings to our CTO at the time, and then it made its way to Andrew Anagnost, the CEO. And he is and I will say this, I don't think science fiction is the only way into foresight. I think it is one of the primary ways into foresight, but it wasn't my first way in. But Andrew's a sci-fi fan, and I was able to kind of like build that through line between, wouldn't it be great to have some kind of a mechanism to like understand where your blind spots are, foresee these gaps, and essentially have some agency and ownership over what future becomes for your organization, right? Like every CEO, I think, wants to have that ability in some sense to kind of make the market, right? Not just kind of chase the market. And
I like that. And
so he asked if I could run a foresight workshop with his executive team, with his C-suite. And I did. And I almost failed because I went in. So
tell me about the workshop. So let's talk about the workshop. I'm sure there's a lot of people on listeners. I know for a fact, a lot of people do workshops, facilitate, so what did you put in it? What was there a fall on your face in the middle of a morning type of moment? Like what was the process?
It was I'm not going to get out of this what I think I'm going to get out of this. It was because the leadership isn't there yet. So what I wanted to get out of it was like an aligned point of view on what this executive leadership team thought future was for them for 10 years out. And because what I was then hoping to be able to do was to then trickle that down out of the exec team into other parts of the organization and use foresight tools and methodology to say like, hey, if we have this vision as an organization, here's what it means for you, product development team. Here's what it means for you, research. Here's what it means for you, marketing, risk management, corporate development, all of those groups, right? What ended up happening was that within the executive team itself, there wasn't consensus on the kind of primary drivers that would be impacting the business or in the direction that they would go in. So you might have one, and I'm giving hypotheticals because I don't want to say exactly what happened in the room, but you might have one person saying like, I think that an increase in the middle class is going to mean that more people have more money to buy more things. And if people are going to buy more things, then we should be making more things for them to buy. So more people are going to use our tools to do that. But then you have someone who's kind of sitting in the seat saying, actually, I work in our startup ecosystem and I work in emerging markets, and it's not buying, it's reuse and it's resell. So how are we thinking about, kind of retrofit versus new consumption? Right.
It sounds like those are scenarios and implications wheels waiting to happen right there.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I, midway through the workshop, I kind of realized like, we're not going to get consensus amongst this group. But what I did realize was what probably needs to happen is another series of workshops where we are together clearly articulating what our kind of what we ended up calling our forces of change, the Autodesk forces of change, what those were going to be for the organization.
Yeah.
Right. And so coming out of that workshop, what I ended up with was a clear focal question for the group, which was not my original desired output, but I think it was enough to kind of get the ball rolling. And, from that, and mind you, this was like a 1.5-year campaign that I was building. So this is not something that happened overnight. This was me going around being the crazy Foresight woman for about 18 months. But what came out of that was the spinning up of the Foresight practice out of the corporate strategy team, and this more kind of like formalized infrastructure for the delivery of Foresight work, with our executive leadership team being our primary audience. And then we had these dotted lines to everyone else. But the team itself was also kind of nested in the office of the CTO. And that was by design as well.
Yeah, that's a structural choice. Like, why do you think, I want to talk about organizational things. Like, why do you think placement matters so much? Like, what happens if it's in the wrong place? I think we kind of know, but like, let's play it out.
Yeah. It's a very leading question, but I think we have,
I know.
So here's what I've found. And I say this feeling like I think every part of an organization is critical. However, I think Foresight work, we have so much trouble already demonstrating the value of what Foresight does. Right?
Yeah.
Because so much of it is not quantitatively measured. We don't have these very concrete KPIs that we can go back to and say, oh, we hit that, we hit that, we hit that. It's oftentimes value stories. It's oftentimes qualitative. And so I think what ends up happening is I have seen a lot of Foresight functions be set in like a CMO's organization, a Marcom, a business development kind of
right, because when you think of storytelling or narrative, you're thinking marketing copy, right? People naturally grab. I mean, it's not the case, but the natural, we'll call it the new, the normie, they're going to think it's communications, right?
But this is where I feel. But this is the thing I always say, that like the story, the scenario, that is just the beginning. That is the tool. You're taking the tool and you're putting it out there, and you're not letting people use the tool. And so for me, like scenarios and narratives, and this was kind of why I went back to grad school and I did my narrative environments degree, because I wanted to understand, like, how do you take deep narrative theory and leverage it in a way where people see the value in it as a tool of thinking about potential futures, as something in the same way that you would think about a financial model. Like, that was the analog I was trying to make, right? And we look at financial models, which are predictive kind of technologies and tools. Nobody takes a spreadsheet and says like, well, here it is. This is what you do. They say, how do we run the numbers? How do we shapeshift this thing? How do we essentially query the tool to say like, what is the best outcome here, right? There's multiple kind of paths forward. And with scenarios and with kind of narrative building, it's that same. It's a prototype of a possible future. If I've done my job well, you should want to interrogate it. It should create a discursive moment. Right? It should be something where you're like, I like this, but there's a tension here that I'm not super comfortable with. Let's pull that component out of the scenario and plug something else in and see how it runs. And so because of that, it was really important to us that the Foresight team was nested within the CTO's organization, because what that enabled then was the scenario was not the end game. The story was not the end game. The end game was an input into an acquisition process, right? Or kind of in an M&A kind of format, or like an input into an industry strategy, strategic intent and realization program, or an input into a product development roadmap.
And that's much more quantifiable, right? Because then you're directly impacting the revenue outputs. That's why, like, I feel like the solutions and the strategy parts, a lot of it used to stop at the scenario, but having that real connection with, feeding the innovation pipeline, feeding the strategy variables, the outcomes that could impact revenue. But like, this group has grown so much. I mean, how does it feel to have created something that has outlasted your tenure? Because so many of these practices, once that, we'll call it the force of nature, which I think would be an apt description of you. The force of nature leaves.
You're too kind.
It takes one to know one, but it's like when you have that, it dies a lot,
Yeah.
And it's,
how
does it feel?
I will say this. It feels really good, but I have to give credit to like the folks at Autodesk as well, because I think they were willing to receive that, right? And we had, very importantly, a CEO and other executive leadership who were really supportive of that group. So like Andrew wanted the Foresight team. He wanted that practice. He came to us often when he had some level of uncertainty that felt quite volatile that he wanted us to explore further.
You're like his Rainbow Six, like secret,
it was
team.
So cool.
You're like secret superpower. I mean, of course,
And I will say, like, I think Erin is a formidable leader, and she has expanded the capabilities of what Foresight is inside of Autodesk. I think I had a small part to do with what that team has become now and what that practice has become. But, I think the organization itself, like, lends itself culturally to want Foresight there. And the practitioners really have a passion for it. And so I think half the battle, and you've probably seen this in the work that you do as well, it's about like fluency building and education.
Yes,
folks just didn't have the language. They didn't have the language to talk about it. And once they found it, they were like super tapped in.
It's championship, usefulness, and fluency. Like you have to have the culture. You have to have people that are supporting it, funding it. They're the people that keep it going, right? Beyond the actual execution. And then people view its usefulness, and then people understand how to speak the language so that they understand the value, right? So now let's talk scale. Arup. So this is awesome.
Scale.
So congratulations, you are in a new role. This is being taped early April. But you
5
started
days in.
5 days in. But you've been there a while. So maybe we can just step back before we kind of like do the drum roll. But they're and I admire their firm as one as an architectural design leader in the world, but two is because they have one of the best Foresight practices, and they wield it not only to communicate the future, but it shows clients. It is a self-serving because it shows the clients that, well, you kind of want us because we're thinking about things that nobody else is. And that's
we can future-proof the work.
Beautiful. Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. So you left Autodesk, you step into a role. So let's talk about that.
So I hadn't left Autodesk as yet. Joseph Hargrave, who was the global director of Foresight at the time, he has now stepped into a new role. He heads up all of Arup University globally. And he was one of my earliest mentors actually in Foresight back in the day. Cool. But
he knows his stuff.
He knows his stuff.
I don't know if they'll let me talk about my like why he made me. He's one of the reasons I went and got my went back to UH. But
that's amazing.
I have to tell him that sometime. But
you should,
he is definitely
please.
He's a wonderful, and he knows. It's not just about knowing the tools, but he knows how to like. He just knows the full body of it, and it's a great. I mean, to have a mentor, it's great to have somebody like that.
And he knows how to talk. He knows how to talk about it. In context, right? And I think that's what matters is like you can have the academic kind of like fervor, but if you don't have the language and the storytelling capability, I think Foresight can fall flat sometimes. But anyway, so he had reached out to me like when I think I had my daughter maybe 6 weeks prior. He said, geez. Hey. He was like, hey, we have this open role. The previous America's leader for Foresight had left a couple years before that. It was still the height of the pandemic. And he reached out saying, would you be open to interviewing for this position? We've put it out competitively, and it's for the America's region leader for Foresight. And I said, yes, sure. Not really knowing, like maybe comprehending fully what that would entail, and still in some sense of mat leave brain fog, I'll say.
That's a big, exactly. I mean, that first year. Is that your first child?
And it was my first child. It was my first child.
Right.
Yeah. So first time. Horrendous. He really got me at my lowest point.
Any parent listening, you're navigating, like you're failing every day.
Everything.
There's no sleep.
Listen, I came out of that interview and I had my husband like listening at the door, and I was like, you have to tell me if I am saying grown-up words because I am talking to grown-ups and I need to know that this is legible.
That's awesome. Oh my God.
It was, but it was also kind of, it felt a little bit like a homecoming as well because I had been at Arup previously. Arup was my first experience in Foresight. They were the ones that gave me the language. They were the ones that exposed me to the tools and the methodology. And
so like coming home, you're coming home.
It felt like that. It did.
After
it
you're
did feel
on that journey, walk about, go to the mountains, meditate for a year in silence. I mean, now you're
I did some soul searching,
Right.
and then I came back, and I came into this new role. There wasn't a team, the Americas region specifically. And for context, Arup is a global design and engineering firm. We have 90 offices, 18,000 people and growing, but it's a London headquartered organization. So the majority of the Foresight team sits quite squarely in London. And in this restructure, we have kind of done away with the regional format in the hopes of encouraging more global ways of working. But at that time, this was like 2021, 2022, we were still very heavily kind of in these siloed regional contexts. And so I came in as a solo practitioner, basically, with the task of, rebuilding Foresight fluency. The firm had a lot of turnover due to the pandemic. I think most organizations had experienced that. And so there were principals who had kind of been there for previous versions of the Foresight team. And then there were a lot of new folks who had come in who had no previous kind of exposure to the practice or to the value it can bring to their disciplines in their work on a daily basis. And so, half the battle was rebuilding Foresight fluency across the region. And then the other one was like translating what Foresight could do out in market, because we had both an internal remit to work with our leadership and help them think about what Foresight could do for the health, well-being, and kind of, ongoing legacy of Arup. But then we also had to go to like our clients and say, hire us because we can future-proof your work. We're not just kind of building the work, we're making sure it's going to be around for the next 50 to 100 years or whatever that kind of timeline is. And I think, now we have this really kind of beautiful concept that we're bringing back in that came from our founder of Arup around like total design, which is how do you kind of bring together skills and mindsets and different perspectives and different regional contexts to explore kind of the widest possible, problem area so that you can kind of bring forward the best possible solution, right?
So he was talking futurist language. He was talking Foresight language without really talking about it. Because that's the beauty of our field, is that people from the different experiences in the walks of life, the kind of futurists they are, like, that is what he's just, his philosophy. Do you think that because of that philosophy is why? Because I can't, and please tell me, are there other Foresight or organizations like Arup's in the world, like at other firms?
I think there are starting to be Foresight practices,
starting to be,
for sure.
They see what you
we might be one of the longer running ones. Yeah.
Well, I think they see what you're doing and the effectiveness of it, and they're probably like, yeah, we probably should do that. But I'm wondering, like, but that philosophy of his is, if that didn't exist, would it Foresight be? That's what I wonder. Like, that would it be like the DNA that legitimizes it, right?
Yeah, I do think it's ingrained in the culture. I think that when you come to Arup, you are most definitely kind of buying into this idea of like being, perpetually curious, wanting to not just do the job, but go above and beyond, and think about like, what else could we be responding to? Like, is this the right question? Is this the right research question? Is this the right project question? Do I have the right team in place? Do we need to upskill ourselves in some way? Are there new emerging technologies we should be leveraging? Right? It's this constant like wanting to learn and expand, I think, that lends itself to Foresight work and to a Foresight practice. And I think our executive leadership is also very supportive of that. And so we, as part of Arup University, we don't just have like a consulting mandate to go out and do the work for our clients. We also work very closely with our leadership inside the organization to help Arup think about like, how do we stick around to make it to our 100th birthday? What does that look like? What does Arup want to be at that time? We're coming up on 80 years.
Birthday?
In 20
80
years.
Okay. So 2046.
Yeah.
Well, and the way that buildings are built, it's for building for the future, right? But it's also different between different places. I think in our pre-interview call, we were talking about like the way you build here in Boston versus Los Angeles, Singapore, Mumbai, Lagos. Like you operate in all those worlds. Like you operate in that. Like, how do you think it's relevant? Like Foresight, how do you do Foresight that's relevant globally without kind of, because that's the thing, when you have to go to 18,000 people, you have such different things to make sure that there's connection to. Do you have other people, almost like Foresight, futurist agents? You know, I can think of layers, right? The core team, the adjacents, and then the kind of the interested ones that kind of contextually design it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, so the really cool thing about Arup is, so the core team, the core Foresight group is within Arup University is about plus or minus like 40 people globally.
Okay.
So imagine 40 people being responsible for 18,000 people.
Wow.
Across the organization, right? Internally. Wow. And then we have over 60 disciplines inside of Arup, like engineering and design disciplines. So that means we are having to reimagine new skills, new approaches, new methodologies, new tools in all of those disciplines, and think about how those evolve over time. And that's everything from like digital tools and infrastructure to water, to aviation, to roads and streets. Like you name it, we have our hands in it. People listening to this podcast have probably walked through, sat through, been in something that Arup has touched, some project around the world, stadiums, roads, whatever, right? And so the way we do it is we don't always do the same Foresight work everywhere for everyone. You know, if we kind of like allude back to that, you know, I think what is quite a perceptive but now overused quote from William Gibson, "The future is here, it's just unevenly distributed." We have to reckon with that, right? We have to reckon with that. And I think part of it is to go back to like, you can't make soup for the world. You know, not everybody is kind of ready to hear or ready to kind of meet you where you are at any given future, right? So I would say from a regulatory perspective, you know, the country that you and I sit in currently is not the most advanced when it comes to adopting like sustainability measures and things like that.
No, not at all.
But we do find a lot of receptivity in parts of Europe. And so that's where we are starting to push some of our work around the principles of like regenerative design and circular economies. It's work we've been doing for years now, right?
Oh, I think about the UX field. The UX field, like in service design, being the journey mapping and all of the optimization, because Europe was very much limited in space and limited in what it needed to optimize. Like service design took off there. It never took off here.
Yeah.
As a discipline. It's the same thing like over there. I think Foresight, I see more activity in the Middle East and in Europe and in Southeast Asia doing like, I would say the pushing the envelope with futures work, because they know that they need to.
Yeah.
They have really the limit. Yeah, they have they don't have the, I don't know, the luxury of waste in that way that sometimes is here.
Yeah. Perceived luxury, I would say, like maybe, you know, but
perceived luxury. Yeah.
You know, and so I think what I have to think about alongside the rest of the wider team is like, how do we take into context, and this goes back to that total design piece, right? Which is like, how do we take into context all of these different cultures, all of these different perspectives? And now the great thing is we do have the 90 offices, right? So I can reach out to somebody in like Kuala Lumpur or like Hong Kong or Sydney or whatever it is and say, hey, tell me about what you're doing over there right now. Like, how do you think something like this would land, right? Or can I speak to a client who you are currently working with so I can get some in real life, real time kind of data points to pressure test the work?
We would do projects with, we would do design fiction, and we would work. We had local experts at McKinsey. We'd have somebody in country to look at, like, I learned like in Malaysia about, we were giving this whole thing about in the 2040, like this artisans, they would collect from the garbage patch, they would collect the plastics and they would turn it into craft or jewelry or things, but there was a whole name to it. There was a whole tradition to it. I wouldn't have known that. And you have to have those people to give it the texture and the context that someone can see that it's like, this is authentic, and I want to read this. I want to actually, you know, understand this. Otherwise, it just, yeah. And it's not about like, I hate these terms like unconscious bias or this or that. Everyone's got bias. Everyone's got experience.
Of course. If
this
you are human,
come
you
from
have
what
bias.
you know.
Yeah.
If you're human, right. It's like, but at the same time, if you would just acknowledge that, okay, these are your perspectives, that's to me the thoughtful thing to do is like, how do we make it relevant for the people the real audience that is going to read it, right? And not just.
But you said something really key, right? The thoughtful thing to do. Like,
yes.
I think there is so much humility required in the work that we do, because, and this is why I go back to saying, I am a humble mediator. I am like the person that connects the dots and sits in the room, sometimes like a fly on the wall, to say like, what am I hearing? What are the whispers of possible futures that I'm starting to hear, and then be kind of the sense maker. But it's never my vision. It's never, I mean, I have my own little side projects, but like if I'm in the work that I'm doing, it's never my vision, right? I have been successful.
Yes, you have. Speaking of side projects, yes.
Good segue.
I appreciate you with the segues. Yes, I mean, you have also a fellow showrunner. You have a show with Tobias, your host, your co-host.
Tobias Ravel, the great, the magnificent.
So talk about where that spark, this is really cool because we need more conversations. We need more shows like this. And it's great.
Thank you.
It's great.
So we have a podcast called Future-ish. FUTUR-ICSH. Well, because we kind of were like, we're not really doing, it's not like super futures, but it's future-ish, it's like, it's kind of there. And we're not super serious about it, but we're like kind of serious about it,
Do you think we're serious? Do you think we're serious here? No. The whole point is to educate, but we got to have I'm not. No. I mean, if you can't laugh at like the potential peril of the future, then
oh man,
just I have a whole prepper community that I can put you in touch with if you want to build a bunker. But honestly,
then you need a support group, honestly, because this work can be really like mind melding in some ways.
Oh, absolutely, especially when you're like we are looking like we're in like the beautiful the backyard garage in Beautiful Mind. I mean, like everything is it starts to kind of get you, but but I love it. I love the name because I want people that on this show that have just different perspectives, different conversations, and I just don't want to just talk to myself. So
exactly,
that would, I could bored myself. I'd bored myself. But you guys have really interesting banter between each other.
We do. It's very like sibling rivalry. I mean, it started because it started because Tobias and I have both gotten, and the funny thing is like he and I both started as graduate researchers when we were doing our masters in London. So he was at the RCA, I was at St. Martin's, and we were in Arup's Foresight team. And then we both kind of left and did our own thing. I went more corporate, he went academia, and then Joseph pulled us back in together at the same time, basically. So he was our design futures leader. He's since kind of moved into another part of Arup University. He leads our strategy office now, but we came back at the same time through like peer pressure is what I would call it at this point. But we got to this point where we're like, hey, we're not actually getting to do the Foresight work we love. Like we are advocating for it for our teams. We are facilitating it for other people to do, but we're not getting to do the nitty gritty, like horizon scanning, signal gathering, all of that stuff. And we would send each other signals all the time in WhatsApp. And so, a couple folks had kind of come to us and said, like, maybe, I want to say jokingly, because I can't imagine anyone would seriously say this to us, but they were like, you should start a podcast. It would be really fun. And so Tobias and I...
Because nobody's doing a podcast,
We're like, because there are so many good ones.
Do you know how many are active? Well, hold on a second. I found
this one included.
Do you know how many out of like the couple million podcasts that are out there, do you know how many are actually active?
No, how many?
Like 50,000.
No way. I thought it was so much more saturated than that.
No, I mean, the thing is in terms of real consistent, I mean, it probably could be higher, maybe 100,000, but there's really consistent shows out of like the million. There's only a fraction of them that like 50, that are really producing.
Well, that makes me feel better actually.
Regularly. Yeah. So like, that's what I feel like, like FuturePod and your show and my show,
and Julian's show.
Yeah. Julian Bleecker was on the show. So if you're listening, you should totally check that out. But he's got a great thing that he does he's the originator of design fiction. But I think there's some really good, and there's the varied conversations. We all do very different shows.
Yeah.
And that's what's awesome.
Yeah. And so Tobias and I were basically like, all right, we need to do something because we both felt very blah in moments. But we love the work we do. I want to say that.
Right.
I don't want to get in trouble with anyone. But
there's never a question of you loving the work. And that's never a question, I wouldn't think.
But I wanted to like be talking about signals again. And, and so we just basically we were like, how do we take our WhatsApp like chat and put it in a podcast? And so it comes out every 2 weeks. One of us brings a signal to talk about each episode, and we basically like dissect it and trash talk a little bit and try to
nice. Yeah, and I've listened to a few of them.
Yeah, but it is very like sibling rivalry. And then
I was just going to say that sibling rivalry is exactly. Yes.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is. And this year we're bringing on guests as well. So like every few episodes we'll have some guests. We've just started doing that. So we're kind of like playing with that format as well. But it's a side project. It's something to keep us excited about futures work.
It's good you have permission. It's good that you have a company that understands that you're a great voice in the community, and to have you be able to talk and share that only benefits them.
Yeah.
Only benefits them.
And it's just to clarify, like it's not affiliated with Arup in any way.
No, and that's why I wanted to make sure you had the disclaimer. But still, it's like there are places it's like no mom, no. But as respect for your time, and we're totally gonna have a round 2. I know that, but I want to kind of get a little bit of, I don't want to say rapid fire, but I want to get into some, continue the funness. I don't know, like it's not even a word. The funness of the podcast talk is like some of the things that I don't know. People would call it the interrogation. It's not the interrogation, but I want to talk about like books, methods, architecture. Ooh. So you talked about we talked about some of the things, like I've been vibe coding this thing, and I think as a designer, when you get into this world of like you build something, it's so beautiful, and then they kill it. Or I worked at Sapient I worked at some ad agencies, and it's like you work on these cool things and they just never implement it, right? You give it to the client and it never sees the light of the day.
Yeah.
Like what's a speculative piece, like a project like you wish had been built? Like what was something
I worked on personally, or that
that you wish like there's somebody where they if it's
what was cool, and it did end up happening, but like 7 years later, was I wish that we had been able to, we did these 4 future scenarios at Autodesk, imagining what the world would look like 10 years out. And I thought that work was super interesting because we were taking emerging technologies that our research labs were actually working on and evolving. And then kind of like gaming out those scenarios. And I really wish we were able to kind of like build those out, because some of them were really cool. But now what has happened with that is one of the scenarios around the Olympics and the kind of a city looking back on the Olympics that they successfully delivered that did not deplete the city. One of my friends who was doing brand partnerships for Autodesk at the time, she took that scenario and went to the LA 28 Olympics team like years ago. And that was a starting point for a conversation to build a partnership with Autodesk and the LA 28 Olympics. And last year she sent me a big bouquet of flowers randomly. And I was like, why are you sending me this? I haven't worked at Autodesk in like 4 years. She's like, I just wanted to thank you because tomorrow there'll be a press release coming out that Autodesk has been named the platform partner for the LA 28 Olympics. And it wouldn't have happened if your project hadn't been created, the 4 Futures project. She was like, this is what I took to that leadership team. And it's something they keep coming back to every single time we talk. So that was amazing.
That's going to make they feel good. So you've had some great mentors like Joe.
Yeah.
But any futurist worth their salt has a library that really annoys their significant other that they wonder what they want. So, but there's got to be that one book that like people who've listened to this show probably know the one I'm talking about for me, but what's something that kind of like how you think about the future? Like what kind of was like mind blowing, like, sparkly things coming out of the top of your head?
It wasn't a book, and I read a lot, and I have lots of amazing friends who have amazing books that I read. But it's that essay, it's that defuturing the image of the future essay. It was
Explain
phenomenal.
that for people. I don't think many people have heard that.
So there was an essay in Walker Center magazine by Andrew Blauvelt. He wrote it back in 2020. So this is like 6 years ago now from the time of recording this. And he talks about this idea. First, there's that line that I think I had shared, which was like, every act of design is in itself a small act of future making. And that to me felt so profound. I was like, aha, like I have, like, this is what I do. Like, this is, you talked about that aha moment of like linking back to architecture. That felt really validating in that way. And I have since kind of expanded to say like every act of design, of inquiry, of technological advancement, of building, like that is an act of future making. So talking about architects making buildings is an act of future making, right? Thinking about new tools is an act of future making. And so I just love this idea that he has said that we are both constrained by the futures we have created, and also we must kind of work ourselves out of these futures, like going to Mars and thinking about the world ending. Like, those are escapist futures, and we're not doing good enough. Basically, we need to do better. And it was this, even like the colonial dream of like futurism is a future, is a scenario that we have worked our way into, and we need to kind of re-envision. And we're still working through the kind of outputs of that. So that's an essay that I honestly assign to every single one of my classes when I teach. It's something that frames a lot of my syllabi.
You must get I'm sure you get like give them an essay to kind of evaluate the paper. Like, you must get some really interesting responses. From students.
You know what I love about teaching is I have like half of the cohort every year is very skeptical. They're like, you're a snake oil salesman. Like, that's what, salesperson. And then the other half is like super psyched about it, right? And they're like, oh, this is amazing. And usually what happens is I can convert that skeptical half by the end of the semester. And it's amazing.
I got a funny thing just to connect so I did a talk at, I have a friend that, from grad school, who runs the brand center at Virginia Commonwealth, VCU. And all these students doing their masters, they're going into advertising or going, or leveling up their advertising careers. So I did like the future of advertising. I came in and talked about being a design futurist. This is probably like a year and a half ago. So over the week, this is early on in the AI tools. So in a weekend, on a Sunday. And I always I say with, ChatGPT, Runway, 11 Lab, I did a couple of different tools. I said, for the cost of like $100 in tools, coffee and my pajamas in 6 hours. Cause I showed this to my friend.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how much would this have cost? Like, he's like, $500,000. He's like, we'd have to get location, craft services, actors, camera, he just rattled it all. He used to run can. And I said, yeah, it took me, and I showed it as like, it was a Nike ad of like a future shoe, a women's shoe, called the Nike Glow. It was really cool looking, had the running and the whole thing. And I showed it to him, and I also showed like other potential jobs and what I showed him the future of the space. Half of the audience was terrified, and half of the audience was like excited and electric because they're like, because think about it, right? You can create concepts and prototype, like you can spec this stuff that you can be an advertising firm and you could never compete with a big shop, right? Or you could just even communicate to a client. And I think that's the peril of it. And I think what you're talking, like, that essay is great. Yeah. So for signals, your show, what's a signal you're watching that nobody else seems to be paying attention to? I think this is appropriate. I don't usually ask this question a lot, but apropos because of your show. Like,
for sure. So there's like, I'll bring up two in particular. One is the zero G manufacturing, lower Earth orbit manufacturing.
Yeah.
And that feels, especially for like the fact that I sit in AEC and that I've come from Autodesk where they do product design and manufacturing, I'm not hearing enough people in my network talk about that yet. And I think we need to be. And then the other one, which is like not related to that at all is, so, Zoran Mamdani was elected as mayor of New York City. He came up through, I think initially his popularity was like he was a musician and a rapper, and he's tried a bunch of different things. Recently in Nepal, they just elected their prime minister, who is also a former rapper. And I think there is something here, and I haven't quite figured it out yet.
Interesting.
So Nepal's kind of like journey to electing their new prime minister was really interesting, because the overthrow of the government happened through Discord, which I thought was super interesting. Yes. And I was reading, yes. So we have an episode on this, actually. I would urge you to listen to it. Not because I'm trying to promote, but because I think it's really interesting.
Yeah.
And it happened through Discord. They organized the movement through Discord. And to the point where I was reading
not Signal or Telegram,
no. And I was reading this article.
Not secure.
Wow. No, but I was reading this article, and in one of the articles, one of the users who was in the group said, the parliament of Nepal right now is Discord. And so there's something there about the language that we are using to talk about quite conventional government structures, and we are reappropriating that to these virtual realms that I think is super interesting. Now, couple that with what I think is not necessarily a new, but a recontextualization of like the influencer politician, right? So we've had the Ronald Reagans and the Arnold Schwarzeneggers, but now we have the Zoran Mamdanis and like Nepal's new prime minister. And I do think there is a shift happening. I feel like there's this undercurrent of something shifting in the political arena where we are feeling like, there's an inadequacy in how politicians have emerged in the last, I'll say 20 years, probably.
Look at polarizing figure like Mamdani, polarizing figure like Trump. Trump's a game show host.
Yes.
I mean, he's a real estate developer, but
his show, The Apprentice, is what catapulted him.
But it's a populism. Yeah. It's a populism wave, right? It's the outsider, right? Which is very indicative. I'm a Gen Xer, so we're always forgotten about when they talk about them.
I'm so sorry.
The boomers have ruined everything. The millennials are the saviors.
And I'm an elder millennial.
Right. It's like the Xers, the forgotten children again, the latchkey children.
The middle child.
Again. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what about us? I'm like, yeah, we're just going to come in and fix it. Because also, if you follow generational cycles, millennials were the greatest generation. They were the ones that fought in Normandy. So we were like, Gen Xers were like Eisenhower, like the battlefield commanders. And like the boomers of that gen were like FDR. So if you think about the cycle of it, it's like, yeah, we're just like the forgotten ones. I would offer to you as a signal to look at, and I've been involved in the space for a while, is orbital data centers. Because what's happening,
interesting.
Two things. SpaceX bought XAI, which was the part of Twitter, but that is giving them orbital AI capability to now put up data centers and sell, because now there's no OSHA, there's no EPA. There's also sun 24/7, solar, nuclear, all the things you could do. And it's like we're going to have, because we have a power issue when it comes to powering all the artificial intelligence. So it's like, you're going to start to see, this is like, to me, beyond sending people up and like space tourism, this is the first, I think, beyond like mining asteroids, is the real moneymaker, commercialization of, it's like the killer app for commercializing space. Nobody's talking. I mean, Musk talked about it, but there are a few companies, but you're going to see it more like, how much can we lift? Because I don't have to fight with the town to build a noisy ass data center. Like, sorry, I'll have to beat that one. A noisy data center next door. No, I can just put it 32,000 miles away. And I think that's a really interesting, like, what is going to move off planet. So that's my signal.
Yeah, but, I'm definitely going down that rabbit hole. Thank you for that, for sure.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Yeah.
So for the fun things, as we kind of, so I never really asked this, but I always love the Restart Civilization contest. You're that kind of person. So like the books, the music, the objects, like what, go with that. Like what, let's riff on that. What would you bring?
Oh man. There's so many things. I'm like, I would be a hoarder.
See, the music lover can't decide. The book lover can't decide.
And I'm both of those, and it's horrible.
I know. That's why I do it. That's why I'm here for.
I don't know. I have Sade in my background, so I feel like you got to have some Sade. But I'll say for objects, because I think I will say this forever, never, never. A pen and a notebook. Like,
there you go.
Pen and a notebook.
There you go.
Write a story, communicate something, share something. That's what you need.
Yes.
Entertainment.
Yeah.
Helps you remember shit when you learn new things. Yeah.
I want there to be like, there's books on how to survive the apocalypse. Probably a good one to bring with you.
Yeah,
I'd probably bring like Shakespeare or the Bible or something to give to give some values. And maybe some comedy.
Yeah.
But okay. So let's finish this up. So taking this whole environmental thing, finish this one. The future of the built environment is what?
Is not always new.
Love it. That's great.
Yeah.
Radha, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you so much. This was really fun.
Thanks for listening to the Think Forward podcast. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms and at www.thinkforwardshow.com, as well as on YouTube under Think Forward Show. See you next time.